Number 5. The Camouflage Cloud. Alright, truth seekers, our first clip up today comes to us from Instagram, and I know, but hear me out first before you discredit it and watch this clip and then tell me what you think. User the UFO God, and look, maybe it's just the name, but I'm inclined to trust them, posted this video recently, and it's been illuminating. In the video, we can see something in the clouds moving, or rather, the clouds themselves moving in a way that almost makes it seem alive. If anyone out there has seen Jordan Peele's Nope, that's the first thing that I thought to watching this clip, and mostly why I wanted to include it in this video. It brings up an interesting thing to consider. We tend to only think of UFO sightings as little black boxes zipping up through the sky, carrying passengers from another world, but what if the UFO sighting was the alien itself? You know what I mean? You follow along? An organic, non-humanoid entity capable of changing shape in ways that our little primitive human brains just couldn't comprehend? Look, I know I'm mostly summarizing the plot of Jordan Peele's brilliant Nope here, but it's an interesting thing to crunch on, and when you're watching this clip, it's hard to think of anything else. I mean, look at the way the cloud moves. It definitely doesn't look like any cloud I've ever seen. And what is there to suggest that extraterrestrial life will fit in neatly into our idea of what they should look like? I mean, we think of flying saucers just because that's what pop culture tells us, but it could be anything, really. There's also the possibility that whatever we're looking at is some incredibly advanced cloaking technology masking a craft. I mean, invisibility cloaking isn't as sci-fi as you think. Prototypes for cloaks are being developed by militaries around the world today. Let me know what you think of this footage down below in the comments, because it had me scratching my head and rubbing my chin, making all kinds of hms and ha's. And if you like what we're doing here and you want to see more UFO content and wild speculation, well, I have got some great news for you, my viewer. I've got loads of UFO videos and I've got tons of vague speculating from yours truly. All you gotta do is hit subscribe. Number 4, Area 51. Our next clip comes to us from Nevada, specifically near Groom Lake. If you're not super familiar with the geography of Nevada, and why would you be unless you're from there, if I told you that Area 51 is located right on top of Groom Lake, would that catch your attention a little bit? You know, the top secret government black site that technically doesn't exist. The infamous base said to be home to all manner of extraterrestrial activity. That's enough run up, I think. Let's check out the clip. Now, anything coming out of Area 51 is already pretty suspect. But this is really weird. In the video, we can see a series of flying lights hovering high above the desert dunes. Bright lights in the desert sky is one thing, but in the video, we see what looks like them forming together. A series of lights merges together to become one larger one flying around. So what could it possibly be? Drones flying around? Voltron? Now, drones seems like it would be the most likely answer if it was anywhere other than Area 51. I'm just saying. Whatever's happening here has to be a top secret. Could this be experiments with technology recovered from beyond the stars? Now, there are countless conspiracies surrounding Area 51, but one of the most recurring and popular ones is that it's where UFO technology is stored and reverse engineered to develop new technology and systems for the US military. Perhaps even pilots could be trained to fly alien craft. Whatever's going on here, the likelihood of us ever finding out is next to impossible. If you've seen our video on Area 51 secrets, you know that they keep everything wrapped tight as a knot down there. Nothing they don't want you to see is making it out of that base. That won't stop us from trying to get a good look. Number 3, bizarre light patterns. Now, our next sighting comes to us from the stars themselves, specifically during a live stream of the ISS, the International Space Station for the uninitiated. The stream is simple enough, a live stream view out of a porthole of the space station, offering a round-the-clock look at the stars. It's relaxing and fascinating, and I recommend you check it out. But it's also a window of opportunity into a world of unexplained phenomena. One astute viewer was watching the stream late at night when they saw something incredibly bizarre. Watch the footage, I think you'll know exactly what I mean. We can see a cluster of lights moving bizarrely across the screen in a pattern all in unison together. Now, this camera is pointed downwards towards the Earth, so some commenters have suggested that possibly what we could be seeing is intense lights shining up from the Earth herself onto the night sky. And while the realist in me can see where they're coming from here, the paranormal investigator in me is fascinated by the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this is something a little bigger than a weird light pattern. Maybe someone in the comments who knows more about lights and stars can help me out with this, but to me, this cluster of lights moving seems like it's something, man, you know? Could this be another example of extraterrestrial cloaking technology? It's far from the first time astronauts have reported seeing strange things up and around the ISS. I have to imagine the International Space Station is probably a hot spot for extraterrestrial activity. I mean, aliens coming to Earth is one thing, that's on our territory, but our big station up in the stars, That's their neighborhood. That's their backyard we put that up in. I'm sure they want to come out and see what that's all about. I wonder if aliens see it as like a funny little tourist destination to check out. Take some photos with. Who knows? Number 2. Lieutenant Gorman's UFO dogfight. Now, not much happens in North Dakota. Fargo is probably a lot more known as a Coen Brothers movie and a slept-on FX series than it is known as a town where anything of note happens. Unless, of course, you count the occasional UFO sighting. In October of 1948, Lieutenant George Gorman of the North Dakota National Guard would make history and inspire theories for decades when he claims he got into a dogfight with an alien craft. He was flying above the town of Fargo, North Dakota, when he saw what looked like an aircraft about 500 feet below him. He radioed into air traffic to try and ascertain what it was he was looking at, and was shocked to hear back from Mission Control, who told him, well, there shouldn't be any other planes in that area. Naturally, Gorman flew in to investigate. He reported that it was a tiny object, some 6 to 8 inches in diameter, blinding white and completely round, blinking on and off. He says that as he approached this strange bright object, it charged towards him. He pursued it as best he could, but when it looked as if the object was going to crash into him, it shot upwards at a 90-degree angle. He attempted to pursue it, chasing it 14,000 feet into the air, only for it to disappear inexplicably at that mark. Later that night, the air traffic control tower reported seeing that exact same bizarre light at the airfield. Gorman touched down and told his superior officers that he had no idea what it was he encountered, but that he had reason to believe that whatever he was pursuing had thought behind its movements, that it seemed to be making decisions, conscientious choices, and it was reacting to what he was doing. Lieutenant Gorman would live out the rest of his days fairly normally, but no doubt in the back of his mind, he must have always wondered just what it was he encountered that fateful night. Number 1. Tic Tac sighting. If you're a UFO enthusiast, you probably already knew about this, but I'll never stop banging on about this because it's the craziest thing that's happened in years. The Pentagon publicly revealed that they've been tracking UFO development for years, putting some serious weight into the UFO discussion. Besides doing more to legitimize UFO discussion than anything else, like ever, it also provided us with a bevy of sightings from government agents to pull from. In 2004, a pair of Navy pilots tracked a series of UFOs for weeks on end. According to their reports, these objects would appear suddenly at about 80,000 feet in the air and then descend rapidly towards the Pacific Ocean, eventually stopping at around 20,000 feet and just hovering. They would either drop out of radar range or shoot right back up into the sky, which is pretty bizarre behavior. These entities were monitored for weeks before 2 fighter jet pilots were officially sent in to investigate the phenomena. Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slight, who flew out to try and get eyes on it. What they found would confound the veterans. The men reported back that the object resembled a giant Tic Tac, an unidentifiable white-colored oval-like aircraft about 40 feet long. Far, far too big to be a drone, and doesn't really sound like any aircraft I've ever heard of. The craft was jumping around erratically, staying just out of reach of radars, but not moving in any one particular direction. The pilots agreed on a rendezvous point to touch down and discuss whatever it was they had just seen, but as they were heading towards it, the UFO flew towards their rendezvous point at a breakneck speed before disappearing entirely. Commander David Fravor said it was unlike anything he had ever seen before, and the whole experience had weirded him out. Completely understandable. I think if I ever saw a giant Tic Tac spiraling erratically through the air, it would kind of affect me too. So what do you think? Any ideas at all? Because that sounds like pretty hard proof of a UFO.
Number 5. A sighting from Colorado. When flying over Colorado, one could expect to see tall mountains, vivid landscapes, beautiful, lush forests, and clear running rivers, all of which are things I miss while being trapped in this void. Something that you might not expect to see when looking out your airplane window is an unidentified flying object carrying visitors from another world. But just because something is unexpected doesn't mean it can't happen. As an airline pilot named Jeremy Corbell found out earlier this year. Earlier this year, Jeremy Corbell was flying over Colorado when he saw something he didn't expect. At first, it appeared to be a shooting star, but this theory was thrown out when it appeared to split into 3 pieces, which then went into a triangle formation. The veteran pilot was so shocked at this that he pulled out his phone and filmed the phenomena. While passing aircraft can often be mistaken for alien ships by people who don't know any better, the fact that this was reported by a pilot who would know if it was simply another plane is very interesting. Multiple theories were put forward, including that the lights were high-altitude reconnaissance drones, but the level of light given off by them disqualified this theory. The pilot described the lights as being unlike anything he had ever seen in his entire career of flying. Over the last few decades, many commercial pilots have apparently seen unusual craft sharing the skies with them, but have been prevented from reporting the incidents by airline companies they work for. Are the airlines worried about their pilots seeming crazy? Or are they worried passengers will be afraid of flying if they know they aren't the only ones up there? Number 4. A sighting from the southeast United Kingdom. You would think that an entire country who have been obsessed with the tales of an extraterrestrial who travels through space and time in a blue police box while kidnapping their citizens to act as his acolytes for the last 60 years wouldn't be too shocked when confronted with evidence that aliens from other planets really exist. But it would seem that no matter how much fiction one consumes, it can still be shocking when confronted with the real thing, as a security guard in England found out in our next entry. When checking CCTV footage from your work, you may be expecting to see animals or even some light crime. But in July 2022, a man in the United Kingdom saw something far stranger. Visitors from another world. On the screen, he saw a large glowing sphere suddenly appear above a nearby power station complex. It hovered above the station and then just as suddenly disappeared. At first, the man thought it was a flare, but there was no trail showing where it could have been shot from. He continued to look for a rational explanation, checking flight radar to make sure it wasn't a plane or a drone. He went outside to see it with his own eyes, but nothing was visible to the naked eye. He brushed it off until a few days later when a coworker came in claiming to have seen the same light hovering and then disappearing over a nearby field. The workers went back through their CCTV footage and posted the footage online. What exactly did they see in the sky? And where did it go when it disappeared in the blink of an eye? These workers will likely never know and will instead carry these questions around in their heads until the day they die. Number 3. A sighting in Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas is a city that would sound like a city in a science fiction novel if we didn't know for a fact it is real. A city where vice and debauchery are encouraged, with claims that no consequences will be remembered once you leave its borders. A flashy city of neon, constructed in the middle of a barren desert. Considering how ridiculous that sounds, and Nevada's already considerable reputation for alleged alien activity, perhaps we should not be surprised that visitors from another world would want to take a look for themselves. Proving that what happens in Vegas does not always stay in Vegas, we have our next entry. A man and his friend were driving home at night when they saw unusual activity in the sky. 2 large white orbs of light were floating in the sky. As if this were not shocking enough for the witnesses, smaller red orbs began to appear as if coming from the larger craft. These red lights would fly off on their own, sometimes returning to the larger white orbs. The witnesses claimed that over 25 of these red orbs came out of the craft and flew around, which begs the question: did they see an alien craft or something else? If it was an alien craft, what was the purpose of these smaller red lights? Were they searching for something? And if they were, did they find it? Was this something sinister or simply an interstellar game of hungry hippos? More importantly, why am I asking you? The glowing white orbs reportedly stayed in place for over 5 hours before eventually disappearing into the night. Number 2. A sighting in Sacramento. For those who are more skeptical, it is understandable that you would not be impressed by a lot of footage that is released of alleged alien encounters. It is often grainy, shaky footage that looks like it was filmed on a potato rather than a camera. And oftentimes, one is right to be skeptical. Oftentimes, things can be mistaken for alien crafts when seen through the lens of a phone camera late at night in the dark. But sometimes, people witness the unexplainable in broad daylight. Such is the case in our next entry from Sacramento, California. In this case, a man was in his yard with his family when he looked to the sky and saw a cone-shaped object flying through the sky. They pointed it out to their parents, who were also in the yard, and all of them did their best to capture footage of the cone-shaped craft. It seemed to morph in shape between a cone and an elliptical shape, but when they zoomed in, they saw that the bottom of the cone was emitting light. It is clearly not a plane, and the light coming out of the bottom is curious to say the least. Number 1. A sighting in Canton, Ohio. When working a full-time job, having the opportunity to relax on your day off with a cold drink in the company of your loved ones is something you look forward to all week. While imagining how you will spend your leisure time, you may imagine a variety of experiences like land darts or barbecuing for your friends and neighbors. Rarely do people imagine that they will be spending their time off witnessing an interaction between the military and an unidentified flying object, as is the case in our next entry. On the 10th of November, a man was sitting on his back porch enjoying a well-earned day off when he heard the sound of a military helicopter. The helicopter appeared to be chasing after something. He looked around and saw several small, white glowing shapes moving at high speed away from the helicopter. He grabbed his phone to record what he was seeing, but several of the shapes disappeared before he could record. However, some of them remained and he was able to capture them on film. While this is impressive footage, the most disturbing part of the story for me is the helicopter chasing them. Were they trying to research the UFO? Or were they attacking them or chasing them away? Whatever it was, let's hope that it didn't result in any tensions between humanity and an advanced alien race. Number 5. The spook light. In the early 1830s, when the Native Americans were put on their forced march during the Trail of Tears, some of them reported seeing something unusual while near Missouri and Oklahoma's border. Something that has remained a consistent part of American folklore and a relatively commonly reported sight ever since. While the Native Americans were passing through an area known as the Devil's Promenade, they apparently saw a glowing orb of light that was floating in the distance. Sometimes it's reported as being the size of a baseball, and other times as being the size of a basketball. Sometimes it remains stationary as it hovers in the night, and sometimes it appears to vibrate and twitch in the air. Explanations have included tales of two Native American lovers searching for each other in the night, the ghost of a Confederate soldier, and even the devil himself wandering the earth with a lantern. It has gone by many names, such as the Joplin Spook Light, the Hornet Spook Light, the Hollis Light, and the Devil's Jack-o'-lantern. The site of the spook light has become somewhat of a tourist attraction, with the area being especially popular around Halloween. But though scientists have speculated that it could be the result of a natural gas leak or car lights reflecting off a nearby river, this does not explain the dozens of sightings that occurred before the invention of the automobile. What if the cause of this floating orb is not the spirit of some lost soul trying to find their way home, but the manifestation of extraterrestrial activity? We've all heard plenty of stories of glowing orbs in the sky that have gotten closer and turned out to be starships from outer space. The spook light could perhaps actually be one of these unidentified flying objects. If you subscribe to the theory that aliens have not made direct contact with us because they are studying our species, it would make sense that this light would first appear during a major historical event where millions of displaced native peoples were forced into long marches. Perhaps the sightings since then have been follow-up studies of the area by aliens. If that is the case, and aliens were observing Earth during the Trail of Tears, let's hope they don't judge us for some of our most shameful behavior. Number 4. Funnel ghosts. Tell me if this tale sounds familiar. A couple moves into an old house. It's a bit of a fixer-upper, but they believe they can put in the work and make it a home. They live there for a while, but when night falls, they take a photo and see something they don't expect. Not the typical idea of a ghost where the spirit looks like a past human, perhaps with a transparent appearance, but what is known as a funnel ghost. These spirits are often described as being swirling wisps or spirals of light that often appear in photos or videos, with little to no explanation. Often, when these funnel ghosts are seen, they are believed to be past loved ones or former residents of the home come back to say hello. But maybe these wisps are really visitors from another planet. If aliens are real, they clearly do their best to remain as hidden as possible from humanity. This would explain why UFO sightings are rarely reported in crowded, well-lit areas, and why they don't tend to be active on social media. Despite alien abduction stories where people are taken away to be studied and probed by our alien visitors, if you really wanted to study humans, it would be much more informative to study them in their natural environments. Obviously, little green men running around your home and watching you while you and your family eat would be suspicious. So maybe they've developed a way to hide in plain sight. An advanced species capable of interstellar travel and with spacecraft that are rarely seen by human eyes and hardly ever captured with any clarity on film could be using some kind of technology that reflects ambient light in order to keep them invisible. If we assume this technology is used to hide their ships, it is not unreasonable to hypothesize that this technology could be available for aliens on the ground. The strange shapes appearing in photos that we assume are ghosts are actually aliens studying us in our own homes, using a cloaking device to remain undetected and only being seen when a camera picks up their telltale shimmer. Number 3. Sightings at the West Point Lighthouse in PEI. When it comes to lists of spooky and probably haunted locations, lighthouses are surely near the top of the list, just under murder houses, ancient manors, and abandoned mental hospitals. Such is the case for our next entry. A lighthouse on the west point of the Canadian province of Prince Edward Island. The lighthouse was built in 1876, being passed from keeper to keeper until the operation was automated in 1963. The lighthouse was renovated into an inn, museum, craft shop, and chowder kitchen in the mid-1980s, and has been the source of tales of the supernatural ever since. Visitors often report rather stereotypical ghost activity, such as lights turning on and off, disembodied voices, and cold spots, sending a shiver up guests' spines. More interesting for the purposes of this list are the tales of a ghostly burning ship being seen in the nearby Northumberland Strait. Legend says that at night, sometimes if you look out to sea, you can see a centuries-old ship whose crew were killed when their ship caught fire and sank. According to the tale, they made a deal with the devil in order to save themselves, and as a result are damned to burn on the ship for all of eternity. From the distance that the people who reported this burning ship would be from the boat, they wouldn't be able to make out with much detail on the apparition, especially at night when the ship appears in the vast majority of reported sightings. So, all they would really be seeing is a large, bright, flickering light coming towards the lighthouse that, through the context of the situation, they would assume was a ship. But it makes me think, there are so many stories of UFOs appearing as bright, shining, flickering lights that disappear just as soon as they appear. What if this burning ghost ship is actually an alien craft signaling with its lights? You may think, why would an alien ship be signaling anyone? But look at the situation from their perspective. You're flying around in your flying saucer above the waters of Canada. You see another bright floating light in the distance. You signal to let it know you are there, and when you get close enough to realize that it is not another alien craft, but a tower with a bright light on it that the humans have built on the cliffside, you realize and turn out your lights, causing your ship to seem to suddenly disappear to any humans who saw you. It might very well be a ghost ship, but the fact that it is so close to what would look like a floating light to the uninitiated makes me think this is just as likely. Number 2. Things moving on their own. Another common type of ghost is the alleged poltergeist. They are the type of spirit who enjoys their afterlife by messing around in your home with the intention of scaring you and causing as much property damage as possible. A common way these spirits apparently make their presence known is by moving objects and making them float through the air. Like when you hear a noise at night and go into the kitchen to investigate, only to find your mother's best china floating through the air before it suddenly drops to the floor, leaving you with one less token of remembrance to honor your loved ones with. But maybe this is not the work of a malevolent spirit, but simply a side effect of passing alien ships. When looking at various UFO sightings from across the world, some commonalities begin to emerge. The craft in question are often bright, shining lights against the dark night sky. They tend to appear and disappear just as quickly, and they often seem to be hovering or flying, seemingly on their own, with no visible means of propulsion. Or at least, none that we can see. Perhaps these alien craft are not flying with the use of rockets, but by manipulating gravity. If these ships are able to do this, they could use this to take away gravity under their ship, allowing it to hover or fly through the night. Something like this could affect the houses below it in a similar way that houses located near airports can have their contents rattled by passing planes. Perhaps when alien craft are negating gravity and flying overhead, they are unintentionally affecting gravity in the homes below them, causing things to float and move, not because of spirits, but because of gravity being manipulated. And once the ship has passed, the objects drop, making it seem like an evil spirit has destroyed these lighter objects out of spite for the homeowner. This would mean that people who are dealing with consistent ghost activity were actually just unlucky enough to be directly below an alien's commute. Number 1. Ghostly figures of the past. Everyone has heard some variation of a ghost story like this. You go into an old building that is hundreds of years old. At first, everything seems normal, when suddenly goosebumps break out across your flesh as a chill runs up your spine. You turn and see something you don't expect. A figure from the distant past stands before you. Perhaps it is a soldier from the 1930s, and perhaps it is a small Victorian child in one of those weird little sailor outfits. You try to stammer out some words of greeting, but before you can, they've disappeared before your very eyes. Stories like this are very common in ghost sightings and can take place anywhere from an old Victorian mansion, a field where an important battle was fought, or even in your own home. You may think that something like this would scream ghost and nothing else. But what if these haunting apparitions are just a side effect of extraterrestrial travel? When considering the possibility of alien visitors, we must ask the question of how they got to our planet in the first place. Even if their craft were capable of reaching light speed, they would take hundreds of years to reach our planet, which hardly seems worth it if assuming these beings have a comparable lifespan to humans. Perhaps they could cryogenically freeze themselves to make the journey more manageable, but that would still make getting to and from the planet a real hassle. Or perhaps these alien beings are capable of faster than light travel, which our concept of science says is impossible. Maybe the answer isn't that these aliens are moving fast. Maybe the answer is that they are bending space and time to reach their destination. If these beings were capable of traveling across the fourth dimension and bending space and time around or folding it in on itself, then it is reasonable to hypothesize that there would be some unintended side effects. One theory of how time works is that all of it is happening at once. So, if a place, say a spooky mansion, were occupied by a small Victorian child in one point of time, and say Ryan Reynolds in another, maybe time folding in on itself to accommodate alien travel would cause us to be able to catch glimpses into the other points in time. So, this hypothetical Ryan Reynolds would see the child from the past and assume it was a ghost. And who knows, maybe the child would see Ryan and assume he is a handsome spirit from the future.
Kicking us off at number 10, we have the O'Hare International Airport. In November 2006, things started to get a little bit unexplainable for staff at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. Just as Flight 466 was getting ready to take off for their scheduled flight between Chicago and North Carolina, a United Airlines employee on the tarmac noticed a strange object hovering above gate C-17. As they peered closer, they realized that the object was some sort of vessel, dark grey and metallic in appearance. From 4:15 p.m, during the 5 minutes that the craft was visible, a total of 12 United employees, as well as a few witnesses from outside the airport, witnessed the saucer-shaped object in flight. Shortly afterwards, witnesses claimed that the craft shot upward, breaking a hole in the clouds, enough so that the United flight staff could see the blue sky through it. The story was quickly picked up by the Chicago Tribune and later made international news. Strangely though, because the UFO wasn't picked up by the airport's radar, the airport officials refused to investigate, claiming that it was merely a weather phenomenon. Next up at number 9, we have the Stephenville sightings. In 2008, the small town of Stephenville, Texas, got a bit of a strange surprise during one particular pleasant evening in January. Mostly known for its dairy farms, Stephenville is located 100 miles southwest of Dallas, and for the most part is a pretty regular town. But on January 8th, dozens of its citizens reported a series of strange white lights above Highway 67. At first, they traveled in a single horizontal arc and then switched to a series of vertical parallel lines. A local pilot, Stephen Allen, reported that the lights spanned about a mile long and half a mile wide. He also estimated that they were traveling about 3,000 miles an hour. Just as a benchmark, the average airliner travels at around 575 miles an hour. On top of this, no sound was reported by any of the townspeople. Weeks later, after the story caught some traction, the US Air Force explained that they were flying F-16s in the area. The townspeople, they didn't buy it. Why? Because F-16s can't fly anywhere close to the speeds that the lights were sighted at. So, who knows? Bringing it in at number 8, we have the USS Nimitz encounter. For 2 weeks, the USS Princeton was on a routine assignment, tracking reported objects that would appear at 80,000 feet and then plummet to hover above the Pacific Ocean. What's that, they asked. By November 14th, 2014, the ship had noted an object that appeared 100 miles off the coast of San Diego. After another nearby naval vessel, the USS Nimitz, had dispatched 2 fighter jets to the location, what they first saw appeared to be churning, boiling water in an oval shape underneath the surface. Then, suddenly and out of nowhere, the pilots reported a white tic-tac-like object that appeared above the water. The strange vessel had no visible markings that would indicate an engine, wings, or even a window. The 2 pilots, Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate, attempted to intercept the craft, but it quickly accelerated away and disappeared. Later, it reappeared on radar 60 miles away. The UFO moved at 3 times the speed of sound and twice the speed of the fighter jets. Scary stuff. Next up at number 7, we have the story of William Bosak. William Bosak was a dairy farmer, they always are, from Polk County, Wisconsin, and on December 2nd, 1974 at 10:30 p.m. he stumbled across something that made him question his belief in aliens. Bosak was traveling from a local cooperative when he saw something on the side of the road on the way back to his farm. It was a tall object that was around 3 meters high and had a dull surface which didn't shine, but strangely reflected the car's headlights. On top of the object was a transparent section which had a creature in it with its hands raised in the air. Bosak reported that the creature was similar to a human being, but its head was covered in hard, short hair with large, bulging eyes and larger ears that resembled a calf's. Its body was covered in a thick brown wool, and it had a terrified facial expression as if it feared for its own life. Bosak couldn't explain what he saw, but as later paranormal reporters found, the town locals considered him to be an honest, truthful man and a general skeptic of UFOs. Since then, though, he's changed his tune and has even stood up to a lie detector test to confirm his claims. Coming in at number 6, we have paranormal hitchhikers. Strange orbs are a pretty common occurrence in UFO sightings, but this one kind of takes it to a new level. In 2011, an unnamed security officer was driving home on a South Dakota highway. Suddenly, hundreds of opaque red lights began to appear around his vehicle and circled the moving car like a strange alien halo. The driver reported to police that he was still doing 60 miles an hour, but suddenly the car rapidly began to decelerate with absolutely no explanation. And then the lights, well, they just vanished. The driver later told police that as he was readjusting to what had happened, he noticed the lights re-emerge at the side of the road. It strangely began to assemble itself into some sort of glowing life form, and then without pause, it was on the bonnet of the car. He reported that it had long, translucent fingers that stretched through the roof of his car. The creature then ran its fingers down his back, which left a searing, burning pain. However, the officer also reported that he felt as if the creature was trying to communicate with him. As soon as the driver saw headlights in the distance, the creature reportedly dematerialized and disappeared, but the driver was left with some pretty terrifying memories. Jumping on in at number 5, we have the story of Gabriel. In Ethiopia, sometime in the 1960s, a young boy by the name of Gabriel was playing in his backyard with a friend. They were running around when Gabriel just kind of disappeared out of thin air. Traumatized, his friend alerted Gabriel's parents, and soon enough, the whole town was on lockdown. No one could explain what happened, and it remained a complete mystery. That is, until 6 months later when Gabriel rematerialized in a busy market square. Just like that, he was back. Witnesses couldn't begin to explain what they'd just seen. If that's not weird enough, the story that Gabriel later told would leave everyone baffled. He said that seconds after he was playing in the backyard, he was suddenly in a place he didn't recognize. Gabriel was led into a glowing, windowless white room by a strange humanoid creature. Inside that room were other abducted children, seemingly from different parts of planet Earth. He said that some of the children had been there for months, but his grasp of time was a little bit off. His captors later led him to a large city-like area with no sky, surrounded by supernatural skyscrapers. He reported seeing flying vehicles that resembled cars, and other humans were walking with creatures that he didn't recognize along streets that almost shone. Gabriel reported that the whole experience lasted a couple of hours, but when he was transported back, he had no idea that 6 months had just passed. Remember kids, never go off with strangers. Next up at number 4, we have the story of Travis Walton. Now, this one is pretty damn weird, so just stick with it. The case begins in November 1975 at the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest near Phoenix, Arizona. Travis Walton was a forestry worker, and along with 6 colleagues, they were on a tree thinning project out in the woods. The 7 of them reported at first seeing mysterious lights, which then materialized into some sort of flying saucer up in the canopy. Mesmerized, Walton was the only one to get out of the vehicle and approach the craft, despite his friends yelling at him to get back. Suddenly, Travis was hit by what he refers to as an energy beam, and he was blasted back over 20 feet. He disappeared over the trees while his colleagues were still trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. Originally, police thought that this whole thing was an elaborate cover-up by his colleagues, and in reality, they'd murdered him and disposed of the body. But everyone lost their minds when Travis turned up 5 days later, claiming that he'd been abducted by aliens and that he'd had to fight his way out. Travis claimed that 3 humanoid beings held him captive. They were grey, smooth-skinned, and blemishless. Later, all 7 of the group passed lie detector tests, adding credibility to this bizarre ordeal. Coming in at number 3, we have the Valentich disappearance. Now, this story is pretty compelling, and whatever the truth really is, some downright weird stuff went on here. At 7:12 p.m. on the 21st of October 1978, one of the most unexplainable UFO sightings in modern history occurred over the Bass Strait in Australia. Born on the 9th of June 1958 in Melbourne, Frederick Valentich was a 20-year-old shop assistant with a passion for aviation. During his 127-mile flight, Fred intended to fly out to King Island, but during his journey, he ran into something a little bit strange. Fred advised Melbourne Air Traffic Control that he was being accompanied by an aircraft that was about 300 meters above him. Air traffic replied that there was no known traffic at that level. He described the vessel as being long and having some unusual features, illuminated by 4 bright landing lights, and was acting in a very strange way. Visibility was good and winds were light, so Fred quickly ruled out the possibility of an optic illusion. The craft passed him regularly at high speeds before switching up direction and altitude. Frederick claimed that the aircraft was orbiting above him, and after 28 seconds of radio silence, he reported that the vessel had just vanished. But moments later, after telling air traffic he was proceeding to King Island, Frederick notified the operator that the aircraft was back. And in his words, it's hovering and it's not an aircraft. This was followed by 17 seconds of a strange, unidentified noise, described as being metallic, scraping sounds. Then all contact was lost. Frederick Valentich's body was never found, and neither was his aircraft. Bringing it in at number 2, we have the Aurora, Texas crash. You're not going to believe this one, but seriously, I'm pretty sure this is legit aliens. In 1897, that's right, 1897, 6 years before the Wright brothers' first flight, numerous sightings of a strange cigar-shaped airship were reported all across the United States. And the small town of Aurora, Texas would quickly become one of the most infamous UFO hotbeds in the world. On April 17th, locals ran out of their houses to the sight of a mysterious object in the sky, and they soon realized that it was about to crash. Slowing down to a speed of 10 or 12 miles, the aircraft gradually settled itself toward the ground, sailing directly over the busy public square and crashing into a windmill in the northern part of the town, which was owned by the town's lawmaker, Judge Proctor. The residents soon rushed over to the crash site where they found strange burning machinery and the pilot who had not survived the crash. Locals reported that the pilot was not of this world, and in newspaper reports they referred to it as a Martian in 1897. There were also a stack of papers found on the body, written in an unknown form of hieroglyphics which couldn't be deciphered. Strangely enough, the townsfolk buried the pilot in the nearby Aurora Cemetery. Yeah, let's stop there. The body is allegedly still somewhere in the local cemetery, buried in an unmarked grave. The cemetery even contains a historical commission marker that mentions the incident. There you have it. There's an alien buried somewhere in Aurora, Texas. And finally, at our number 1 top spot, we have the Roswell incident. No alien list would be complete without the most infamous and near enough credible UFO landing in history. In July 1947, a strange airborne object crashed on a ranch in Roswell, New Mexico. The big kicker to this story, though, is how the US military reacted to the events that would later unfold. On July 8th, an Air Force public information officer named Walter Holt issued a press release stating that officials had recovered a flying disc from the Roswell crash site. Later that day, the Air Force changed their story, claiming that the flying disc was actually in fact a weather balloon. Seems a little bit fishy, right? The incident faded into obscurity for over 30 years, but in 1978, dozens of officials poured forward claiming that the whole Roswell incident was a complete cover-up, and that as many as 11 alleged crash sites had been part of a large-scale military operation to contain the truth. In 1989, a former mortician named Glenn Dennis put forward a detailed personal account where he claimed that he'd witnessed multiple alien autopsies carried out at the Roswell base. What this gave birth to was an astronomical rise in UFO popularity, with thousands of people pouring in across the globe with similar stories and experiences. What do you guys think? Have you ever experienced an unexplainable alien incident? Do you believe that we're not alone in the universe? As the old saying goes, the truth is out there.